The late afternoon hung heavy over rural Texas, with thick clouds gathering low on the horizon. A storm was coming, but it wasn't just the weather that felt wrong. There was something eerie in the air. Too quiet, too still. The only sound was the distant creaking of an old windmill and the soft rustle of dry grass under boot. At the edge of the pasture, Owen Charbonneau, a rugged cowboy in his early 60s, tightened a section of fence. His shirt clung to his back, damp from sweat and humidity, while the brim of his straw hat cast a shadow over a weathered face that had known more pain than peace. Since losing his wife, Blake Lafleur, 2 years ago, Owen had thrown himself into work and isolation. The only living soul he truly relied on was Moose, his German shepherd, loyal, sharp, and somehow always aware of Owen's moods. But today, Moose wasn't acting like himself. He paced restlessly along the fence line, his ears perked, nose in the air, growling low like something unseen was watching them. Owen glanced over and chuckled dryly. "It's just the heat, boy, or a damn raccoon." But Moose didn't move. He was locked on something near the shallow pond that stretched beyond the pasture. Owen walked toward the water's edge to retrieve a dropped pair of pliers. The pond shimmered dull brown under the fading light. Then the surface erupted. A massive, dark-scaled body lunged from the water with terrifying speed. A giant snake, thick as a tree trunk, coiled around Owen's legs and waist like a vice. The impact knocked him backward into the muddy shallows. He gasped, trying to scream, but the creature's strength was overwhelming. It was crushing him. In an instant, Moose sprang into action. With a snarl that tore through the silence, Moose launched himself into the water, teeth bared, heading straight for the serpent's head. He bit down hard, shaking violently. The snake twisted, its powerful coils tightening around Owen, then loosening ever so slightly. It was just enough. Owen sucked in a breath, his ribs screaming in pain. The water churned violently as man, beast, and loyal dog fought in chaos. Blood mixed with mud. The sound of Moose's snarling and the thrashing of scales filled the air. Then Owen saw it. A gash on Moose's side, bleeding badly. Yet the dog refused to fall back. He stood between Owen and the monster, even as the snake reared again. And that's when something happened. Something no one could have expected. The snake recoiled violently, its body half submerged in the murky water, hissing with rage. Blood trickled from the spot where Moose had sunk his teeth. But the beast wasn't finished. It reared back, ready to strike again. This time not at Owen, but at the dog standing between them. Owen, coughing and barely able to move, could only watch in horror as his best friend faced the impossible. In that moment, the world narrowed into one sound. Moose's growl, low and defiant, vibrating through the air like a warning. Then, without warning, the snake lunged, and Moose moved, not away, forward. With terrifying speed, the shepherd launched himself again, locking his jaws around the snake's neck. The water exploded in violent thrashing. Owen forced himself to roll onto his side, reaching for a nearby tree branch with trembling hands. The pain in his ribs was sharp and deep, but he used the branch to push himself up, eyes locked on the chaos unfolding in front of him. Moose held on as the snake whipped its massive body, trying to shake him off. With every ounce of strength he had left, Owen stumbled toward them. Just as the snake began to coil around Moose's hind legs, Owen swung the branch down hard across its body. Once, twice, a third time, the final blow landed across the serpent's eye. The snake recoiled in fury, letting go of Moose, and slid back into the muddy water with a deep splash, disappearing just as fast as it had appeared. For a few seconds, silence returned to the pond. No hissing, no movement, just the sound of Owen's heavy breathing and Moose whimpering quietly in the mud. Owen collapsed to his knees beside his dog. Moose was still alive, but barely. Blood stained the fur along his side, where a deep puncture wound throbbed beneath the torn skin. His breathing was shallow, but his eyes remained on Owen's face. There was something in that gaze that broke Owen in half: loyalty, pain, and love. He whispered, "Hang in there, boy." Just hang in there," as he gently gathered the trembling animal into his arms. Cradling Moose against his chest, Owen stumbled back toward the farmhouse, his body screaming in pain with every step. The path felt longer than it ever had. His phone was inside, and help was a long drive away. But there was one name he knew by heart: Tyler Marchand, the local vet and an old friend from years past. As Owen staggered into the house and fumbled for the phone, his mind spun with fear and guilt. Moose had saved his life, and now Owen could only hope it wasn't at the cost of his. The phone rang twice before a voice answered. "Marchand here." Owen's voice cracked. "Tyler, I need you. It's Moose. He's hurt bad. Real bad." The gravel crunched violently under the tires as Tyler Marchand's old pickup skidded to a stop in front of the farmhouse. Before the engine even died, the veterinarian was already out, med kit in hand, sprinting up the steps. Owen Charbonneau stood in the doorway, soaked, muddy, and visibly shaking, Moose cradled in his arms like a child. The dog's breathing had become rapid, labored, each inhale a struggle. Tyler took one look and didn't waste a second. "Lay him on the kitchen table. Now." Owen cleared the table with one arm, knocking over an old lamp and scattering envelopes. Tyler laid out his supplies like a battlefield surgeon: gauze, antiseptics, a syringe. Moose let out a soft whine as he was placed down, his side covered in blood and debris. Tyler pressed a towel against the worst of the wound. "He's going into shock," he muttered, more to himself than to Owen. "He lost a lot of blood, and if that thing was venomous..." He didn't finish the sentence. Owen stood silently, fists clenched, jaw tight. The house smelled like iron and wet fur. He stared at Moose's eyes, searching for any flicker of strength. "He saved my life," Owen finally said, voice low and raw. "I wouldn't be standing here if it weren't for him." Tyler looked up briefly, their eyes meeting in a moment of unspoken understanding. He'd known Owen for decades. He'd never seen him this shaken, not even when Blake died. As Tyler injected Moose with a dose of anti-inflammatory and pain meds, Owen's mind drifted to the snake. How had something that size ended up here? It didn't make sense. The pond was shallow. Locals hunted and fished here all the time. Yet that monster, whatever it was, had been hiding in plain sight. And for how long? A chill crept down his spine. This hadn't been a random encounter. Something was off. Deeply off. "You should get yourself checked out too," Tyler said, snapping him back to the present. "Your ribs look bad. Might be fractured." "I'll be fine," Owen muttered. "Just fix him." Moose's breathing began to slow slightly, his body relaxing under the sedative. Tyler wrapped the wound with practiced hands, glancing at Owen again. "He's tough. If he makes it through tonight, he's got a real shot." Owen nodded but didn't speak. He pulled a chair beside the table and sat down, placing one hand gently on Moose's paw. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Neither man noticed the figure watching from the edge of the tree line. A tall silhouette, standing still in the shadow of the woods, eyes fixed on the house. The storm finally broke just after midnight. Rain pounded the tin roof in waves, and thunder rolled across the hills like distant cannon fire. Inside the farmhouse, the soft beeping of the monitor Tyler had brought with him filled the dim kitchen. Moose lay motionless on the table, breathing shallow but steady. Owen Charbonneau hadn't moved from his chair in hours. His hand still rested gently on Moose's paw, as if letting go would somehow let the dog slip away. Tyler stood by the window, staring out into the darkness. The trees swayed violently in the wind, but something about the woods tonight felt wrong. He hadn't told Owen, but on his way up the driveway earlier, he'd seen tracks. Not snake tracks, boot prints. Fresh, large, and leading toward the tree line near the pond. Too clean to be Owen's. Too fresh to be old. He'd brushed it off as maybe a hiker or hunter who'd lost their way. But now, with the storm pressing in, he wasn't so sure. "I don't get it," Owen muttered suddenly, breaking the silence. "That snake. It wasn't like anything I've seen in my life. Not around here. Not anywhere." Tyler turned from the window, You said it was at least 10 feet long? More like 12, Owen replied. Thick, dark, not just aggressive. It came for me. Snakes don't usually behave like that, Tyler said quietly. Not unless they're provoked or trained. Owen narrowed his eyes. What are you saying? I don't know, Tyler admitted, but I think we need to start asking the right questions. Suddenly, Moose let out a weak, pained whimper. Owen leaned closer. The dog's eyes fluttered open for a brief moment, meeting his. It was only a second, but it filled Owen with something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. He's fighting, Owen whispered. He's still in there. Tyler offered a faint nod. He's not done yet. Before either of them could say more, the porch floorboards creaked. Both men froze. Tyler moved slowly toward the door, reaching for the old shotgun leaning by the coat rack. Owen stood, ignoring the sharp pain in his ribs. The sound came again. Deliberate footsteps, heavy and slow. The door rattled slightly under a sudden gust of wind, but no one knocked. No voice called out. Owen stepped forward and opened the door. The rain poured in sideways, but there was no one on the porch. Only a small object sat at the top of the steps, soaked through. An old photograph, half-torn, of Blake Lafleur, and someone else's hand on her shoulder. Rain lashed against the porch as Owen Charbonneau stared down at the photograph lying at his feet. The paper was soaked, edges curled, the ink smearing slightly from the storm. He bent down slowly, his ribs screaming in protest, and picked it up with trembling fingers. There she was, Blake, smiling, radiant, her arm hooked around someone just out of frame. But the detail that made his blood run cold wasn't her face. It was the hand resting gently on her shoulder. A man's hand, familiar, but not his. Inside the house, Tyler Marchand waited, tension thick in the air. When Owen finally stepped back in, dripping and pale, Tyler saw the look in his eyes. Not just confusion, but something deeper. Betrayal. What is it? Tyler asked. Owen said nothing at first. He simply handed him the photo. Tyler took one look and his brows drew together. That's not you. No, Owen said quietly. It's not. His voice was flat, distant. He sat down slowly, still holding the photograph like it might vanish if he let go. This was taken about a year before she died. I remember the blouse. I remember the day. But I wasn't there. He paused. And I sure as hell wasn't the one holding her like that. Tyler sat down across from him, lowering his voice. You think she was having an affair? I don't know what to think, Owen muttered. We had our problems. After Colton left, she changed, got quiet, secretive. But I never imagined. He trailed off, the thought hanging unfinished. The rain outside continued to beat against the windows like a clock ticking down to something inevitable. A low whine pulled both men from their thoughts. Moose shifted slightly on the table, his breathing irregular again. Tyler checked the wound. He's stable, but the venom might have had more effect than I thought. Owen gently stroked Moose's head. Don't you give up on me now, he whispered. Not you too. Suddenly, headlights flashed through the front window. Both men jumped. Tyler reached for the shotgun again, moving to the door. A dark-colored pickup truck was idling at the end of the driveway. The engine remained running, the driver hidden by rain and shadow. Then the door opened, and a tall figure stepped out. Soaked, slow-moving, but unmistakable. Colton Dubois. Owen's estranged son had returned home, unannounced, after nearly a decade. But it wasn't just the timing that was strange. It was the look on Colton's face. Not surprise, not relief, guilt. For a moment, Owen Charbonneau didn't move. He stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the figure coming up the steps. Colton Dubois, his only son, whom he hadn't spoken to in nearly 10 years. The rain soaked through Colton's flannel shirt and jeans, but he didn't seem to notice. His boots hit the wood of the porch with slow, deliberate weight. Owen's hand tightened instinctively on the edge of the doorframe. There was no hug, no words, just a long, heavy silence between father and son. "Can I come in?" Colton finally asked, voice lower than Owen remembered, a little rougher around the edges. Owen nodded once and stepped aside. Colton entered, dripping, glancing around the old farmhouse as if expecting ghosts. His eyes landed on Moose, still unconscious on the table, wrapped in bandages, his breathing shallow. "That him?" "Yeah," Owen said quietly. "Saved my life." Colton walked closer, softer now, almost reverent. He reached out and rested a hand gently on Moose's head. "I remember him when he was just a pup. Guess he grew into something special." "He did," Owen replied. "He's got more loyalty in him than most men I've known." The comment hung in the air like a blade. Tyler cleared his throat in the background and stepped out, sensing the storm that was about to erupt had nothing to do with the weather. Colton turned to his father. "You got the picture, didn't you?" Owen's breath caught. "You know about that?" "I left it," Colton admitted, jaw clenched. "I figured it was time you knew." The weight of those words crashed down like thunder. Owen took a step forward, eyes narrowed. "Knew what, exactly? That your mother was sneaking around behind my back? That there was some other man in her life?" Colton didn't flinch. "No, that the man in the photo was me." Owen stared at him, stunned. "That's impossible. That's not your hand. You would have been, what, 17? I was 18. It was right before I left. Mom and I had gone to a doctor's appointment. She'd been feeling sick. I didn't know she asked someone to take that photo." He paused. "She didn't tell you, did she?" Owen's heart pounded. "Tell me what?" Colton looked him dead in the eyes. "She was pregnant, and she lost the baby 2 weeks later." The room went silent. The sound of the rain faded. And just like that, the past Owen had buried for a decade began to unearth itself. Memory by memory, truth by truth. Owen Charbonneau felt the ground shift beneath him. The air in the room had thickened, heavy with shock and unspoken grief. For years, he'd carried the weight of Blake's death, believing she'd drifted away from him emotionally, believing maybe she'd been hiding another man. But never once had he imagined she'd been hiding a pregnancy, a child they had lost. And he never even knew. He turned his back to Colton Dubois, staring out the window into the blackness of the storm. "She didn't say a damn word to me, Colton. Not one." Colton's voice was quiet, almost broken. "She was going to, but after the miscarriage, she changed. Said you had enough pain already. Said she couldn't put that on you, not after everything with me." His eyes dropped to the floor. "She blamed herself. Thought it was because of the stress. Because I left." Owen rubbed his hand over his face, trying to breathe through the ache in his chest. "So all those nights she couldn't sleep, all the time she'd sit alone on the porch, it wasn't about me. It was about the baby. It was about all of it," Colton said softly. "You, me, the baby. She kept it locked up inside until it ate her alive." Owen looked back at his son. For the first time in years, he really looked at him, older, yes, hardened, but still the same boy who used to ride bareback through the fields and bring frogs home in his pockets. A boy who'd left angry, but who had clearly never stopped carrying the weight of what he left behind. "She didn't deserve to carry that burden alone," Owen muttered. Colton nodded. "Neither did you. That's why I came back." Just then, Tyler Marchand stepped back into the room, face drawn. "Moose's vitals are dropping. He's not responding like I hoped." The air snapped tight again. Owen rushed to the dog's side, resting a hand over his chest. No, not now." He looked to Tyler. "Do something." "I've done everything I can," Tyler said grimly. "He needs a miracle now, Owen." As Owen stood over the animal that had just saved his life, the truth of what had been lost, and what might still be lost, hit him all at once. His wife, his unborn child, his relationship with Colton, and now Moose, the last living thread connecting him to everything that still mattered. Owen didn't say a word. He just bowed his head and whispered, barely audible through the storm outside, "Don't take him too." The storm had calmed by morning, but inside the Charbonneau house, the tension hadn't lifted. Moose was still alive, but barely. his breathing shallow, heartbeat weak. Tyler Marchand had stayed through the night, administering fluids and watching for any sign of improvement. Owen Charbonneau hadn't slept. He sat beside the table, one hand resting on Moose's paw, the other holding tightly to the photograph left on his porch. Across the room, Colton Dubois paced, his eyes bloodshot, haunted. As sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, it hit a worn floorboard near the pantry just right. The edge slightly raised, as if something had shifted during the night. Owen noticed it as he got up to stretch, his boots brushing over the seam. He paused. That board hadn't always been loose. He crouched, pried it up, and beneath the dust and old nails, something waited. A sealed envelope, yellowed with time. He stared at it in disbelief. Written in his wife's handwriting were 2 words. For Owen. Colton approached slowly. That wasn't there before. She must have hidden it, Owen murmured. Maybe after everything. His fingers trembled as he opened the envelope. Inside, a letter, written in Blake's delicate script, dated 6 weeks before her death. The first lines stopped his heart. Owen, if you're reading this, it means I didn't find the courage to say these words out loud. And for that, I'm sorry. The letter was a confession. Blake had never cheated. The man in the photo was indeed Colton. She had been pregnant with a girl. She had planned to surprise Owen but miscarried after a heated argument between Owen and Colton that drove their son out of the house for good. Guilt consumed her, and she never recovered from it. I wanted to protect you from one more heartbreak, she wrote, but in doing so, I carried it all alone. I hope, one day, you and Colton can forgive each other and find your way back. Owen couldn't finish reading. His eyes burned. He dropped into the nearest chair and buried his face in his hands. For years, he had built walls of anger and assumptions, and all along, the truth had been beneath his feet, literally. Before anyone could speak, a sharp knock hit the front door. Tyler turned toward it, frowning. Expecting someone? Owen shook his head slowly. Tyler opened the door, and there stood Grayson Pelletier, the reclusive neighbor from 2 ranches over. He looked older, thinner, and in his hand was a worn leather satchel. Grayson's eyes met Owen's. We need to talk about Blake. Grayson Pelletier stepped inside, shaking off the rain. His face worn and pale as if the truth itself had been eating at him for years. Owen Charbonneau didn't move from where he sat beside Moose, but his eyes were locked on the old man with a cold intensity. Colton Dubois crossed his arms and leaned against the wall, wary. Tyler Marchand remained silent but alert near the door. The room held its breath. Grayson set the worn leather satchel on the table and opened it with deliberate slowness. Inside were a few old photographs, a birth certificate, and a folded, water-damaged piece of paper. I should have come sooner, he began. But I was a coward, and Blake made me promise to stay out of it, unless something happened to her. Owen stood, voice low but firm. Out of what exactly? Grayson looked down at the paper in his hands, then back at Owen. Out of your marriage, out of the truth. Blake and I, we knew each other long before you did. Colton's jaw tightened. Tyler took a slow step forward. How long? Grayson didn't flinch. She and I were high school sweethearts. We had a child, a daughter, born when we were barely 18. Blake gave her up for adoption. Owen's world tilted again. That's not possible. Blake never said anything about. She didn't want you to know. Grayson interrupted, his voice cracking. She carried that grief her entire life. And when she found you, when you two built something together, she was finally happy. But then, years later, she started getting letters. From the girl. From your daughter. The silence was deafening. Grayson pulled a photo from the satchel. A young woman, dark hair, Blake's eyes. Her name is Emily. She found Blake a year before she died. They met in secret a few times. Blake wanted to tell you, but she was afraid. Afraid it would break what you two had. Owen sat down hard, his knees giving out beneath the weight of it all. So Blake had a daughter before me, and she never told me. She wanted to, Grayson said. But after the miscarriage, after Colton left, She couldn't bear to open old wounds. Colton stepped forward. "Where is Emily now?" Grayson hesitated, then placed a folded letter on the table. "She came looking for you, Owen, just last month. I think she might be coming back." From the table, Moose let out a faint groan, his first sound in hours. All heads turned. Outside, tires crunched the gravel driveway. Someone else had arrived. The front door creaked open before anyone could reach it. A young woman stood there, soaked to the bone, her long dark hair clinging to her cheeks. She looked no older than 24, but there was something in her eyes, calm, searching, familiar. Owen Charbonneau stood up slowly, his heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with age or pain. The photo Grayson had shown him didn't do justice to the truth. She looked exactly like Blake. "Hi," she said softly. "My name is Emily. I think I might be your daughter." For a moment, no one in the room spoke. Colton Dubois looked stunned, frozen where he stood. Grayson Pelletier lowered his head, his part in the story finally fulfilled. Tyler Marchand quietly stepped back, knowing this moment didn't belong to him. Owen stared at her, his throat dry, eyes burning. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic music. Just years of silence, pain, and lost chances, all wrapped in a single breath. Owen took a step forward, then another. He stopped just inches from her. "You look like her," he whispered. Emily's lips trembled. "I was afraid I'd waited too long, that you'd never want to see me." He reached out and touched her shoulder gently, like she might vanish if he pushed too hard. "I didn't even know you existed, but you're here now, and that's enough." She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. From the table, Moose let out another groan, stronger this time. The group turned as the dog slowly lifted his head, his eyes opening fully. Owen rushed to his side, falling to his knees. "That's it, boy. Come on." Moose gave a weak wag of his tail, and for the first time in days, Owen let out a real laugh, shaky, emotional, but real. Tyler knelt beside him, checking vitals. "He's not out of the woods yet, but that's a damn good sign." The storm had finally cleared. Sunlight poured in through the kitchen windows, lighting up the worn walls and weathered faces. Owen stood between his son, his daughter, his dog, and the pieces of a life that had nearly slipped through his fingers. Later that afternoon, they buried the photograph Blake had hidden beneath the floorboards, not as a secret, but as closure. Together, and for the first time in years, as the sun set over the Texas hills, Owen Charbonneau didn't feel like a man haunted by what he'd lost. He felt like a man finally ready to live with what he still had.